Good evening. Call to order the regular board meeting for the Medina City School District. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. If you'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
Mr. Hilbert?
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Skidmore?
Here.
Ms. Pavlik?
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of September 21st, 2020, and the work session of October 5th, 2020.
Second.
Are there any additions, removals? Oh, I'm sorry. Were there any corrections? No? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Hilbert?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
Are there any additions, removals, modifications to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll.
Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Hilbert?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
At this time, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Sable.
Thank you. And I want to open up tonight by congratulating our Medina Battling Bees football team. Huge win this weekend against St. Ed's. St. Ed's, I believe, was ranked 6th, top 10 in the state, and we were able to knock them off to move to the next round where we will be facing Ignatius. I was talking to Mr. Hodke today, and he said that just might be the biggest win that we've ever had in our football history, at least recent history. Really, I think our boys, our coaches, deserve an extra congratulations considering the circumstances that they're performing under with all of these COVID restrictions that went back to the summer and then carried through the season. But I'm proud of our Medina football team and our boys. Also want to wish both our boys and girls soccer teams good luck as they head into their regional playoffs this coming week, I believe midweek, and then heading into the weekend. So good time for Medina in terms of athletics. So we're forging ahead despite what we're all dealing with. It's good to see. I'd like to share COVID updates with the board as well as the community this evening. And I know I have items listed here on the agenda, but I'm going to kind of run through them and then ask Dr. Kwolek to come up and present specifically on the high school. I did want to mention that I do have a parent family letter that I've prepared and will be sending out tomorrow morning. Much of the information in the letter is similar to what I wanted to share with the board this evening. And much of it pertains to some of the common questions that we have recently been receiving. The first, I want to acknowledge some of our parents' frustration with the situation we're under right now with COVID. I know communication can be a challenge, especially during a time when you're dealing with a moving target. And I think we all really want some stability in our lives and to know what's happening in regards of the decisions that are being made, especially when they impact our children or they even impact our work because a parent might have to be home to be with a student. The challenge that we've been facing as a school district is the amount of change that occurs on literally a weekly basis with this pandemic. We're fortunate to have close communication with surrounding districts and our health department to help us move through this. What I have decided to do moving forward as we've made these decisions is to work more on a short-term basis. And I know that's the piece that can be frustrating. The reason why is our goal, as I've stated in the past, is to have our students in school and to keep them into school. So to make too quick of a decision in terms of changing the direction that we're going to go not only creates instability for our students and staff, but it could also get us into a position where we're not providing the best academics for our students under the given circumstances. One of the questions that I've received as the county has gone red and many counties in the state, as the county has gone orange and many counties in the state have gone red, is if we go red as a county, does that mean we're going to go back to online? No, that does not necessarily mean that we're going to go back to online. This summer when we were putting our COVID plan together, a lot of responsibility was put on schools to make decisions about when schools should be online, hybrid, or face-to-face. We really lean on the experts, the health department, as well as the state department to help us make these decisions. And early on, the color system was literally the only measure that we clearly had to work from. Since then, in collaborating with the health department as well as surrounding districts, we came to realize that we needed to take a fuller picture of what is happening with the COVID situation when we make our decisions about whether it's safe for our students and staff to be into session. So we still do utilize the color system, but it's not the only thing that we utilize. We'll be looking at the amount of COVID prevalence within our more immediate district area. In addition to that, an important piece is the spread that is occurring within the community. The state refers this to incidence, and one of the things to watch for is if we get into a high incidence situation within the county. It's at those times that we will work to make decisions about possible adjustments to how we're delivering academics. Our goal is to give adequate notification, or as adequate as we possibly can, to our parents, students, as well as our staff. I can't sit here and promise that that's going to be a 2-week notification. As a matter of fact, I'd say if we're in that situation, it likely won't be. In order to have that kind of advance notification, we would be in a situation similar to how we started the school year, where we made a commitment to be online for a period of time and then would reevaluate once we got to the end of that online time. And again, this time the goal is to keep our students in school as long as we can and as long as it's safe. And I want the board and the community to know that we're not making this decision on our own. Ultimately, yes, it is our decision, but it's in collaboration with surrounding school districts. It's important, though, that we take into account some unique aspects to our district that surrounding districts may not have. And we all know that the size of our high school has been one of those unique situations as well as one of those challenges. The other thing that I wanted to mention is notification in regards to COVID cases. Unfortunately, over the past couple of weeks, we have had an increase in COVID cases within the district. Obviously, this is disheartening and we don't want to see it, but the reality is that this is a part of living in a pandemic area and moving forward with our students and staff in the buildings. So when we make these kinds of decisions, we really try and weigh what's best academically with safety. And what we're not going to do is put students in a situation where they're unsafe, but here 5 days a week, or staff, or vice versa, where they're completely safe at home, but we don't have any contact with our students and we're not delivering the best academics. So it really is a fine balance, and they're not easy decisions to make. And I know there's varying strong opinions about what's best and what's the best direction to go. I know that as I make recommendations to the board and I work with our team here in the district, which includes administrators and teachers, we will continue to keep the best interest of students in mind. And the best interest of students during a pandemic is both academic and curricular. In terms of notification, in the event of a COVID case, we are required by governor's order to communicate to parents in a specific way. And this is different to how a school district would typically communicate with parents regarding an illness within the school. Because of the pandemic situation, the governor has ordered that if a COVID case occurs within a school, there's 2 separate notifications that have to go out. And I know this has been a little bit confusing at some of our buildings. The first notification is notifying all the students within the specific classroom where the COVID case occurred. So that's a classroom communication. At the elementary level, that could be one single class. If you're talking about the middle school or high school level, that would be every class that the student is in. In addition, we also need to do a notification for the building. So we send a separate notification out to the building, letting all the parents know that there has been a positive case within the building. If a parent does not receive a second letter specifically saying classroom, that means it's not a student directly within your child's classroom. Real challenge that school districts have faced as they've seen positive COVID cases is the tracing measures, contact tracing measures that take place, as well as the implementation of quarantines. With the contact tracing, that's just exactly like what it sounds. We cooperate with the health department and provide them with information regarding the student's schedule and interactions that student may have throughout the day with staff or with students. We are finding that the procedures that we put into place are seeming to be successful, at least in the tracing process. I think one key thing we've done at the elementary level is we've developed pods for the classrooms. So we have small groups of students always working together, so it's easy to trace back who that student had contact with. Once we collaborate with the health department in terms of contact tracing, the health department then determines what quarantines may or may not need to occur. I think it's important to note that that is not a decision we make as a school district. We are not the experts in the transfer of disease. That is the health department. So the health department makes that determination, and then the health department reaches out to the individual families regarding potential quarantine or even moving forward with some sort of a COVID test. I do want to mention that with the recent cases, really all the cases that we've seen this year, the health department has been very quick to get in contact with families. It's a good thing because our parents know right away, and it's a good thing because it helps keep our students safe so that we don't have students who may have been in contact returning to the school building. So when we send out these notifications, I know one of the common questions I've gotten is, well, how do I know if my child was in the vicinity or had close contact to this individual? And the answer is, if they were, you will hear from the health department. If you don't hear from the health department, it means your child was not within close contact or proximity to this individual that may have been positive. I know it's a very difficult process, especially as a parent. When students go into quarantine, we have many more students and staff that are on quarantine than are actually COVID positive. And it's a precaution. And as a parent, to have your child at home, or as a teacher to be stuck at home when you may not be feeling sick, but you had close contact with an individual, I recognize the frustration that that can create. The reason why a system like this is in place, though, is again to continue to keep our students within the classrooms. So as difficult as quarantining is, it is part of the process to make sure that we can stay in session and we don't have widespread of the COVID virus. Another common question that I've been receiving is when we presented the district calendar to the Board of Education back towards the beginning of the year, we did note during the holiday season, approximately November 30th through December 18th, that there was a possibility of us going online. Again, I want to restate that this is a constantly fluid, changing situation. And at the time when we developed the calendar, we were working off the information that we currently had. I'm not sure that in regards to the holiday season, that information has changed much. With the concern that there could be an uptick of COVID cases as we head into the holidays. I think another big part of the concern is the amount of travel that typically happens around the holidays, with families seeing other family members or friends that are out of town and you may not see on a regular basis, and the concern that this could create in the further transmission of the COVID virus. We don't know what's going to happen come this holiday season. We have not made a decision to go online during the holiday season at this time. It is something we are regularly talking about as we look at what we're going to do in the upcoming months, because the holiday season, believe it or not, is just around the corner. Our goal is going to be to keep our students in our classrooms as long as we can. So even with the window that we developed as a potential online, it doesn't necessarily mean that if we go online during the holidays that it will definitely be between those dates. It could start earlier, it could start later, it could go later, or it could not happen at all. So I've heard from several people, or we can be online during all the winter, and the answer to that is I sure hope not. But I can't guarantee that it's not going to happen because I can't predict what's going to happen with the pandemic. Another common questions I've received are in regards to MODA. Our MODA programs are just about midway through at the elementary level with the Online 2.0, as well as at the secondary level with Apex. We have had families asking if they can have their children transition back to the classroom. We've also had requests to have students transition out of the classroom into the online learning format. Mid-semester, this just is not an option. The disruption to the children's academics in making that mid-semester transition would not be academically sound for the students. For our middle and high school students that are participating in the APEX program, that program is a self-driven but structured program. And the challenge with having students transition back midstream is that they wouldn't be finishing or completing their online instruction. So working with families through completion of that online instruction is going to be important as we come to the end of the semester. We will be sending out a confirmation forms coming in November. That'll likely come through our curriculum department. And in those forms, we will be looking for information for families that want to stay in MODA, would like to come back to the classroom, or would like to move to MODA. And we're in the process of developing what that's going to exactly look like in regards to the form. We will only be sending out one form, and the goal is to give a period of time for parents and families to make that decision. I know it's frustrating how early we're sending that form out, that we may be asking families by the end of November or early December to make a big decision like that for second semester. But we really don't have an option because depending on what enrollment it ends up being in MODA or returning to school will have an impact on our COVID procedures depending on what our numbers are. In terms of the elementary level, we could be in a situation if we have a lot of students returning where we have to pull teachers out of MODA and return them to the classroom. Students returning from MODA will return to their home schools. If there's room within an existing classroom, they'll be able to go into that existing classroom. If there isn't room, then we'll have to create another section for a teacher to teach, which could mean redistributing some of the students that are already face-to-face in order to balance the class numbers. At the middle school and high school, it's more of a simple process than it is down at the elementary buildings because we don't have our teachers directly teaching the online programming. So they'll be able to fairly seamlessly return to school, enter into their schedules. They are already scheduled within the buildings. We purposely left it that way to decrease class sizes as students pulled out for MODA instruction. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well is we're all hoping an end to this pandemic. And I'm sure one thing that is weighing on parents' minds or will be as they're trying to make these difficult decisions is, well, what if the pandemic comes to an end sometime in the winter or February or early spring? Are students going to be able to come back or are they going to have to finish online? My goal will be to have our students return to school if they choose to. So the goal will be to still have the MODA option in place for families that would like to finish out the year in that fashion, but still allow our students to come back because we'll be in a situation, if that is the case, where social distancing and things like that will no longer be a concern. On the flip side of that, if we have a large amount of students return to school across the district, that could impact our approach at all the buildings in terms of COVID procedures. So what I mean by that is currently we have about 1,200 plus students enrolled in MODA. If we had 1,200 plus students return for second semester, we would not be able to social distance in all of our buildings the way we're doing right now. So we have actually relied on MODA and students being enrolled in MODA in order to be able to do the social distancing to bring all our lower level children back. So that could result in a potential hybrid even at the lower levels if we're in a situation where COVID restrictions and mandates are still in place. Again, I'm only sharing the possibilities because we don't know what's going to happen. We may see a balance shift in MODA, so we'll see similar programming as what we have now. We will continue to communicate with our families and try and provide the most updated information that we can as often as we can. An important piece I want to press upon too, as I've talked about, this is a fluid situation. So it's important as parents review communications that you look at the date on the communication because things are changing and one communication from now could contradict something that was sent out a month ago because of the changing situation. And again, my door is always open, as is our building principals and our board office administrators. Another outstanding resource, and I think a good place to start in terms of getting help and feedback, is reaching out to your child's teacher. I've actually found many of the questions that have come up are actually more classroom-related type situations where working directly with the teacher is often the best route to go. And the last big question that we've been receiving is in regards to the high school and when will students be returning 5 days a week face-to-face. And at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Kwolek up to talk about the hybrid model, where we're at, what we're looking at, where we might be going. And just to remind everybody that doesn't know that Dr. Kwolek is currently serving as our interim principal at the high school, in addition to being our assistant superintendent. So she's working very close with the high school staff through this process.
Perfect. So I'm going to just share some thoughts. Can you guys hear me okay? It's a little loud. About the hybrid model, and then talk about a 5-day return. And then if you guys have any questions, just let me know. So I think I want to start with sharing, we know the hybrid model is not perfect. So I think what we're going to look at in talking with Mrs. Cassidy is sending out a survey to our parents and our staff and also our students, and just ask for some feedback on this model. So Mr. Sable and I were talking today, I think it's the 4th week of this model. So again, I think anything you try for just a few weeks is not going to be perfect, and you need feedback, and you always need to look to improve. But I guess that's the first thing I've been sharing with parents, and I know Mr. Sable has as well as we talk, is this is only our 4th week in this model. So we need to look for feedback, we need to look to improve, and I think about what Tina shares in the Department of Instruction. You know, we need feedback, and then we need to look to make changes. So I think we're going to do that with the hybrid model. We would have had, this would be our 3rd Monday. And I think I shared with high school staff today, the biggest concern we're hearing from parents is about the Monday day, the minutes of the Google Meets, how long they're happening for, and if we could do something different with that Monday for sure. So I just wanted to make sure people knew we are looking at that. Whether we stay in the hybrid model or not, if we need to be back in it, we still need to look for ways to make that better. So then the next thing we want to talk about is the 5-day return. And I think there's 3 areas at the high school that need to be looked at if we're going to bring students back for 5 days. And that's study halls, lunch, and then the actual classroom that the students are in. So when we talk about study halls, I've looked, as I talk to parents, they talk about Westlake and Strongsville and Mason down in southern Ohio. We have some really large study halls, and some of it goes back to when we reduced services at the high school. We reduced electives and some other things. So we have study halls that can be as big as 300-400 students. So remember, when some of those study halls are going on, you also have lunches, and you have lunches with hundreds of students. So we do have about 800 students at Claggett, and that can work, and that's about how many students we have at the high school right now. But those lunches are also by grade level, so they're even lunches. At the high school, the lunches aren't necessarily even. So you can have large numbers of students in lunch. We do have a plan to make lunch work and study halls work, but we need about 17 additional people to help us with that from about 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. So 17 is a large amount of people from 10 to 1. We're hoping when we send out our parent survey, we would be happy to use parent volunteers during that time. We will certainly post jobs during that time, but we'll be using lots of different spaces. So the media center, all the spaces people have brought up, we would certainly utilize those spaces. I know Mr. Ross and I talked at the recent rec center meeting. One of the things people keep asking us is, couldn't we take over the rec center? And I think people need to remember that's a business, so it's open during the day, not the whole rec center is available for us to use. But there are spaces we can use, and our gym classes do go down there during the day, so we could use the upper parts of the gym, the media center. Essentially, with lunches, we'd be utilizing most of the open spaces at the high school between lunch and study hall. Again, the other piece is we have to keep kids at a 6-foot distance. So one of the schools people brought up to Mr. Sable and I is Mason, which is in southern Ohio, which is our size and has students back 5 days a week. They have students spaced 3 feet apart, and we can't do that per our health department direction. So until restrictions change as well, we're not able to bring kids back in the space we have seated the way Mason is doing it at this time. So I know I've had parents bring up that as an example. So again, given the current restrictions, we do need about 17 people, additional people, from about 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. We're also going to need about 120 additional tables. So again, these aren't insurmountable obstacles. They're just big things that would need to happen. And then the last one is classes. Oh, let me go back to lunch again. We also need some additional serving pieces, and we would need some cafeteria staff. So when you're serving kids, again, someone had asked, can you eat lunch in the classroom? So I want to bring this one up as well. Remember, kids would have to travel all the way from the cafeteria then to those classrooms, and this is a large building. So by the time they went down, got their lunch, and went back up to the classroom they were assigned to, for some of those kids, a large portion of their lunch would be over. So that's not really a reasonable thing at this high school. And then in terms of classes, what we're doing is meeting individually with each teacher to look at the number of students in their class if all the students are back, and then making sure we're maintaining that 3-foot distance and how many students can they fit in their classroom. For the older part of this building, the classes are a little bit smaller. For the newer part, they're a little bit bigger. So there's different things we need to talk about in terms of class sizes and how many kids can fit 3 feet apart. And as Mr. Sable said, this has become more and more evident as we are quarantining students based on when there's a positive case. If you are within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more, then that is a name the health department wants if you're around someone who's COVID positive. So if we were to bring all the students back, that's going to increase the number of students who are quarantined if they're exposed to a COVID positive case. So if you look at the quarantine numbers in Mason or places that have students back, they're going to be higher. So bringing all students back, I think a worry of mine, and I think Mr. Sable shares it, is we're going to have many, many more students quarantined at a high school our size than under a hybrid model. The other question we've gotten a lot of is about video in the classrooms. And so I know we've talked a lot about this. I've had some really good conversations with parents. I think when it comes down to it, what parents want is their students to be engaged 5 days a week. But when you really speak with the teachers and with the students, if your student is at home logged in a device, the teacher can't really ensure they're engaged. They can ensure they're hearing something, but they're not in front of them engaged. So our concern is instructionally, it's really not the desired experience because the teacher is not going to be able to redirect them. They're not going to be able to make sure their computer's working. So I can't guarantee for a parent that your child's up in their bedroom learning. Most of the kids we're finding might have their cameras off. They might be on their phones watching TikToks. And so they might be telling you, yeah, Mom, I'm logged on all day. But what we worry about is if teachers were to move to a 5-day instructional model, so they're teaching something new every day, and 2 of those days your child's at home in their room logged in. For some students, they will absolutely log in and engage for those 5 or 6 periods. For other students, they're going to be at home, kind of checked out, and then those 2 days are going to be 2 more days they fall behind. So I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. I'm saying we're all just trying to balance all that with what's best for kids, again, during a pandemic, because we know what's best for kids is to be here 5 days and COVID to be gone. And so if anyone has that cure, we're waiting for it. So maybe the vaccine can come quicker, as Mr. Sable said. So the other piece with videos in the classroom is it's not completely engaging. Because, again, the teachers are not standing at a podium like I am right now. This works really well for a board meeting because we're going to stand here. You guys are going to stay still. But a teacher's moving around. They're going to work in small groups. So if someone's at home, I'm not going to see them answering a question. Ryan O'Cull and I were talking. The teacher's computer is going to be on with a camera, but if I'm over helping Rob Skidmore with something, they might just see, Mrs. Pavlik on the screen. They might not even hear what I'm doing over there. So it's discussions we need to keep having, but again, it's not ideal. And none of it's ideal, and it's, as Mr. Sable said, it's balancing safety with instruction, knowing that nothing's going to be ideal right now. Nothing's going to look like it did, I can almost not say a year ago at this point, but 2 years ago. And then I think the big other thing we need to remember is we have about 300 students in MODA right now. So we need to plan for them coming back when we look at class sizes and other things. We don't know how many students are coming back, so we need to plan for all of them coming back and then looking at being able to have all those students back at the high school. And when we are looking at meeting with the teachers and looking at how many students they can hold in their classes. So know as well that we're also, teachers can move classrooms, they could move to different places. Some people have said, well, have the teachers move to the cafeteria, but remember, we're going to have study halls and lunches in the cafeterias, in the media centers, in the gym hall, in the hallways, in the PAC. So there aren't a lot of places to move once you do that. So in terms of a timeline, I guess I just want to let you know the quarter ends Friday. So I just want people to keep that in mind. This would be the second model students were in this quarter. And then given, I think Mr. Sable shared too, the increasing COVID rates, I think we're just trying to look at, we will continue to move forward and plan what do we need for a student's 5-day return. But we just wanted Mr. Sable and I to engage the board in letting you know where we're at, what our thoughts are, what our concerns are. Know that I know Mrs. Cassidy is working with the group to see what can we do to improve online 2.0. We'll also be meeting to work on what can we do to improve hybrid. Again, not that we're going to stay in either one or sure we're in either one, but we also need to continue to meet to talk about what does 5-day a week look like and how can we make that happen. So that was my goal tonight, is just share those thoughts with you and answer any questions you have.
I had a question, Dr. Kwolek, and this was a side discussion I think we had the other day, Valerie and I did with Mr. Sable. I think I heard the answer, but just for the record kind of tonight, have we thought about like picnic tables? I know some districts have done picnic tables. I don't know if you could put 3 students, one on either end and one in the middle, you know, and have enough distance. Have we also thought about tents, you know, permanent type tents that would allow, and maybe they could be heated, you know, and so forth in the middle of the winter, I don't know, but to allow a larger space outside. And obviously there's cost for any of these things, but I mean, have we considered some of those things? And thank you.
You must have been talking to Mr. Chrisman, because I was at a meeting with him. He took all the circus tents. He calls them circus tents, but I said, Steve's taken them all, so we don't have any left. But the kinds of tents we'd need, I don't know if any of you have been to like a Cirque du Soleil show outside. Like, so those are the tents I was thinking, because they'd have to be heated about this time of year. But in terms of tents, given the weather, they'd have to be kind of those full tents that you could put kids in that are totally enclosed. But we did look into those, and they're so cost prohibitive because, again, you have to be fully enclosed and then heated. And I can get the board some of that. It depends. You guys probably know, I'm no expert on picnic tables, but they're either 6 or 8 foot. So if they're 6 feet, you can really only fit one student on either end, barely, because remember, students have to be 6 feet apart. So I have seen school districts that have more than that, and they're really not supposed to. So students are really supposed to be 6 feet apart when they're eating because they have their masks off. So that's what's hard with picnic tables. But you can absolutely do outdoor seating, and we did talk about that at the high school. It's just hard because you have to have someone to go out there and supervise. So we do need additional staff if we're going to have students outside eating. But we didn't move any further with that because we would need the additional staff.
The other thought is just whether the school day at the high school, and again, this would require an entire reshuffle, but whether the school day could be divided in such a way that it could run from, say, 9 to noon and say from 1 to 4 and have, you know, an hour in between, but have half the group come in the morning and half the group in the afternoon. I don't know if that option's been explored at all, and just not have the lunch as an issue with it. Possibly.
And I know Mrs. Cassidy was involved in that committee. I know the committee did talk about that, and I think they balanced the instructional benefit for kids of 5 days a week, not a full day, versus 2 full days, and thinking about they come for 4 hours. Do you get more? Do you get less? So I know that's something the committee talked about as well, in terms of is what matters coming 5 days, or is it getting a full schedule? The other schedule that was looked at is coming for your core classes and not the electives. But then there was a lot of discussion about, well, what if I'm an AP art, and that is really my passion. Now you're going to tell me I have to take art online? And I know Brunswick pursued that, where the core classes were during the day and the electives were in the only online, and they removed that model as well because it was kind of the electives then people felt like they became secondary. So it's hard because whatever model you pick, I kind of feel like someone finds a different model, but I do think we have to have this dialogue to decide what's the best model for Medina. And no model's perfect, but we do have to find the one that's best for our students and helps them do the best we can in a pandemic. And as Aaron said, balances safety and instruction. Again, being one of the largest high schools in the state of Ohio, we're not Buckeye, we're not Cloverleaf, we're not Highland. We're just so large.
Dr. Quallig, I had a question. You mentioned the extra people, and you may have answered this. I just didn't hear it. Are you talking about extra jobs, or are we hoping people will step up and volunteer for that?
Either one. So I think when we do the parent survey, we'll let them know we need people from 10 to 1, and if there's parent volunteers that are interested. I know Mr. Sable asked when we needed teacher subs if parents were interested in signing up, but
Dr. Quallig, I would just like to thank you for all of the efforts, because really some of the, as I mentioned to Mr. Sable before, some of the greatest inventions through time have come from people thinking outside the box. And that's really what a lot of that going on. So, and I love that you are opening up for parent volunteers. I have a feeling you're probably going to get a number of them. And also, too, I would like to ask if anybody has any other ideas, too. Please contact Dr. Quallig.
Absolutely.
And because it's definitely going to have to figure out how to live around this virus, since it doesn't seem to want to go away. So how do we live with it? How do we live around it? So thank you again.
Absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to mention is we are doing open campus as well, which is something we haven't done in the past. So if students have a lunch and a free period before or after, they can leave the building and come back, which helps a little bit with study halls and lunch. But again, not enough to make a huge impact on how many staff we need or the places we need. So we tried that. Always have done late release or early release and late start for some kids, but now we've opened it up to as many kids as possible as well. So,
well, thank you to you and to the committee for trying to come up with creative ways, and while doing that, doing what you can to keep our kids safe and putting our kids first. So thank you.
yeah, and it's not just me. I mean, the high school administration has been amazing, and the staff there. And I want to say, too, I met with the staff today, and they wanted to make sure you and the community knows how amazing the students have been. The lanyards, wearing masks, our students are incredible. So I need to let you and the community know that. The students have really stepped up. They're amazing. And same with the staff. I mean, it's not an ideal time to be in education right now, and they've done a fantastic job. But our students, too, have been amazing.
And that's all I have for this evening. If there aren't any other questions.
Actually, before we go on, I have a question for Mr. Sable, just from what he was talking about earlier with the students testing positive. Do we require a student who has tested positive to test negative before they are able to return back to the classroom?
Nope, we are not involved in the decision on a student returning to the classroom. That's all based off the medical and scientific data through the health department. So the health department sets all of those timelines and makes the families aware as well as us aware as well.
Thank you.
At this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Chambers.
Good evening. The district bank balance decreased by $2.9 million in September to $86.9 million. This is $81,000 below last year at this time. General fund revenues were above last September by $2.4 million. The combination of real property, public utility, tangible taxes, and homestead rollback taxes accounted for this increase. General fund expenditures were below last September by $635,000. Purchase services, capital outlay, and other expenses contributed to this decrease. The sales tax fund balance is down to $3.2 million. The The district spent approximately $186,000 in September. The largest portion went to the Medina roof, also to the Northrop Trail, and to the vestibule at Blake. The Recreation Center capital fund balance remains at $205,000. I know you like that one. The district did not receive nor did it spend any money on capital funds at the rec center in September. The district received $54,000 in interest income for September. The total collected for the fiscal year is approximately $262,000 below last year at this time. And finally, the district has a general fund true days cash estimate to be 256 days. This is down from August by 9 days and below last year by 16 days. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to ask for board communications.
I have a couple things. I was just going to piggyback off of what Mr. Sable said, not to forget about our cross-country kids who are in the districts this weekend. They're having a great year, and wish them well, both the boys and the girls cross-country teams. The other thing is the rec center met Thursday, and Dr. Kwolek, if you wanted to add anything about the rec center meeting, Mike reported that, because of the coronavirus, a lot of people the membership scans are down because not a lot of people are going back to the gym, but the rec center is still remaining open. It seems like, I don't know, I think it's a clean place. That's just me, But he said the membership scans are down, I think he said 40% since the pandemic, since they reopened. And he said that the extension project is off the table, and they were considering extending off of the fitness room. And I didn't know if you had anything else, Doctor. Okay, thank you. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I do want to thank the staff for collaborating with Mr. Fasco's family and putting together that memorial at the track on Saturday. It was not only moving, but it was, I think it was good for everybody who knew Mr. Fasco and the family to get to see everybody and share memories, and then all the pictures and all that. So thank you for doing that. Mr. Fasco was he was a great man. So rest in peace. Thank you.
I just want to mention that Finance Committee met 3 weeks ago, and we'll meet again this week, Wednesday. Wasn't a whole lot to report other than what everybody else seems to know already, and that's that revenue is down and investment revenue is down, and 5-year forecast is forecast rather conservatively. Hopefully in the next, I know Mr. Chambers mentioned that he wasn't comfortable that we were going to get any of that money back, but let's hope that some things happen at the federal and state level and we do start to see some of that come back.
I participated or attended the Community Partnership Committee meeting about a month ago, or last month, and the parents that were there are very supportive of the district and the things that we're doing and trying to get the kids back to school and what we're doing. They were very supportive of that. Policy Committee met and reviewed the policies for a second time, which are now on the agenda this evening for a first reading for the board. The Curriculum Committee meeting also met recently. The parent and student survey was shared with the parents that are on that committee, which the board reviewed at our work session, this last work session. We also, Mr. Sable was there and discussed SOAR and Ed 21, Portrait of a Graduate process. Ed 21 and SOAR also had a free virtual conference that Mr. Sable shared with the committee members that they could register and attend that conference, as well as the board members. And I was able to attend some of those sessions last week. I hope that some of the other board members were as well. Some of them were pre-recorded, others were live through Zoom. I found it very educational and inspirational. There were several districts who talked about how they developed their Portrait of a Graduate plan, and then how they developed the learning framework, and what their journey was to actually go from their Portrait of a Graduate to what those competencies they wanted in their graduates, to how that was reflected in the curriculum. So it was interesting to see that whole entire process, which is, I know, what we're planning to do, but to see it actually in action and the results of that. And then they shared success stories of, one of the qualities in the Portrait of a Graduate they wanted to see was innovation in their graduates, and how now, during this time, their students were put to the test, and how they could innovate and put that forward and come up with different strategies or things for the classroom. And so it was really interesting to see. Another item I wanted to mention was they did have some breakout sessions, and there was one specific to board members, and there was a community member in there who shared that she was in high school when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and talked about how the schools down there were closed for a year. But the students still graduated. They still went into college. They still had careers. They went on to master's programs and have become successful adults. And I thought that was good to give us some perspective. I know that we're all worried, concerned that our students are going to be behind. They're not where they should be. They're all learning or not learning, we all have anxiety and concerns. And I think those anxieties and concerns are shared across the country. And we are all in the same boat. And I just thought it was good to have that perspective that we're doing the best we can. This is our first pandemic. We're going to get through this, and our kids will be okay as long as we do what is best for them. Our kids will be okay. Thank you.
I don't have a lot to report other than a couple committees. Again, Becky and I were at policy and with the committee and worked well. We have first reading tonight for the policies, and then Valerie and I with Joe Magnaka and the administration were at facilities, and it seems like a lot of routine projects at this point. A lot of the things we were working on earlier this year are kind of put on ice for a little while, and hopefully will be revisited at some point in the future. But again, we hired the architect earlier this year, and those projects are temporarily on hold. But again, as has been discussed, the Portrait of a Graduate is going to move forward with a new strategic plan that the district is working on, and so that's great. And it sounds like it's not going to be with just a focus on COVID, that's something going on right now, but it's not going to be dictated from COVID, because I think a lot of consensus is that eventually we'll be beyond this, that this hopefully won't be permanent. If you look at the Spanish flu, it was not permanent, okay, in 1918. So hopefully this will be the same way, and within a year or two, this will be a memory. Not always the best memory, but a memory. And a lot of the decisions right now are somewhat dictated by COVID. I know the district's had a lot of purchases of things related to that. Got to go see the girls soccer the other night, and they've had a great season. Several of us were traveling this weekend in West Virginia, and I don't know if you heard a loud roar, but it was several alumni that cheered when we found out Medina won over St. Ed's. So we were very pleased to see that, and one of the fellows that usually travels with us helps coach, Adam Feeks, but congrats to Adam and Coach Laird on leading the football team. And again, it's anytime these football teams or any type of team is successful like that, it's the kids and the coaching, but also it's the entire program. So you think about that, you go back to the middle school, you go back to the Pee Wee football days and all that. That really ties in. And it's great to see Medina having successes, and it appears that hopefully they continue to move on with that. And I appreciate Dr. Qualick sharing the update with the high school. Again, I've always believed that education is essential, just like going to the grocery store, just like going to the doctor. We do need to do it safely, but if you've flown this fall, you get on an airplane and you're right next to somebody on most of the airlines. In fact, there was an airline I flew on a couple weeks ago, and every seat on the plane was filled. So it depends. Some of them are doing every other seat, some are doing every seat. So you're not 3 feet away from people, and I'm not suggesting the schools go less than what the health department's recommending. But it's interesting that there's aspects of our life where they do put up with that. And but again, we do have some positive outbreaks here and there, and we have to be incredibly concerned with that. But I do hope that, just my personal opinion, I do hope that we're able to keep getting kids into the buildings as safely as possible, as best we can. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I will turn it back to Mr. Chambers.
If it pleases the board, we have the following action items. Item number 1, the treasurer's report. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the September 2020 treasurer's report. Item number 2, end users agreement. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the end user agreement between Power School Group and Medina City School District for the 2-year eFinance Plus license fee conversion commencing January 1st, 2021 in the amount of $119,000 and subsequent years estimated to be $22,400. I'd like to talk about this first. If you recall, about 3 years ago, I came to the board and said that the state is no longer going to be supporting their software program. This software program was built in 1976, 1978, whatever it was. It was using COBOL and Fortran. It's still using COBOL and Fortran. And for those who are using COBOL and Fortran, I feel sorry for you because it's no longer being supported anymore by anybody. COBOL and Fortran were the Google and the Microsoft of their time, and that's what it is. It was their time, like the pet rock had a time. So we're going to get away from this, and if the board goes through with the approval of this, then we'll start commencing a conversion here come November, and hopefully be done with the conversion come January, February. We have item number 3, supplemental to the 2020-21 permanent appropriations. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the following supplementals. We have the Claggett Uniform School Supply. They have the monies available for this. Your communications, they are taking in monies as we speak. And your Honors Academy at Root program is looking at those monies available as well. And then we have a then and now purchase order. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the following then and now. This Brooks Publishing Company, they handle the children's, the children's records for us. And we're just looking at approval of, they have the purchase order out there, but it came just after the invoice came, so. Questions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve these action items.
I'll second. Any comments or questions?
Mr. Chambers, I know it was mentioned that the general fund revenues are down, but I also believe in your summary you said that general fund expenditures are also down for this time of last year. So I would like to thank the administration for making sure that we are looking to see where we can save where we can. So thank you.
And I would also just like to comment on the end user agreement again. Is trying, definitely an archaic system that has been being used. It would be like trying to run one of the first or second versions of your operating system for the iPhone from this day and age. So I know it's one of those necessary evils.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any public comment on any of the treasurer's action items, Mrs. Busby? Okay. Hearing none, roll call, Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I will turn it back to Mr. Sable.
First up is donations. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations to Medina City Schools. There are two particular donations I'd like to point out to the board. The first is a donation from Sandridge towards the field turf. They had committed approximately $25,000 for the field turf. It was 4 years ago now. And they have continued those payments despite the situation we're in with COVID, so we're happy to see that. The second is I'd like to thank our Medina Athletic Boosters for a donation of $50,000 to the athletic department for the purpose of purchasing uniforms for the winter of 2021, spring 21, and fall 21 sports. Obviously, this is a very generous donation that allows us to keep other costs down that we would otherwise have to pick up. We are doing this format a little bit differently this year. Our boosters, fortunately, have always donated uniforms to the district, at least in my time here in the district. I think it was just last year, the year before, that we actually had some student athletes come in and model those uniforms for the board. We did change that process where instead of donating the uniforms, they are donating the finances for the uniforms, and then we're purchasing those uniforms as a district. So this cleans up the process both for the district as well as with the boosters. Number two is policies. As Mr. Skidmore mentioned, we have several policies that the policy committee has recently gone over to present to the board for a first reading. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following revised and deleted policies for a first reading. The policies will not be presented to the board for final approval and potential adoption until the regular November 2020 Board of Education meeting. Number three is a memorandum of understanding with our Medina City Teachers Association. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding between the Medina City Schools Board of Education and the Medina City Teachers Association regarding winter co-curricular contracts. I do want to point out that MCTA has agreed to enter into a approximately 1/3 payment system for our supplemental winter coaching contracts. This is very similar, if not identical, to what we did this past fall. With having so much unknown with COVID, this allows the district to be able to pay coaches in portions dependent upon the amount of the preseason and regular season that's completed. I really want to thank and commend our teacher association in working with us collaboratively through this process and being understanding and flexible with the situation and the unknown situation that we're in with COVID. Number four is a memorandum of understanding with Akron Children's Hospital. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding between the Medina City School District and Akron Children's Hospital to provide telemedicine nurse practitioner services to students with parent permission at no cost to the district. Number five, facilities rental rates. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve an increase in labor rates for the Medina City Schools use of school facilities rental program guide. There are various adjustments to the rental rates. I don't think any of them are above $13, $15. The purpose is because the cost of employees has obviously increased. This hasn't been updated since 2012. So after 8 years, we reevaluated the rates and adjusted as appropriate. Number 6 is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreement for the 2021 school year, and this is for Cintas. They provide uniform cleaning services for the district. Many of these uniforms you see with our custodial staff and our maintenance staff. In addition, they clean the mop heads for us as well, so we're not purchasing new mop heads constantly. And number 7, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreements for the 2021 school year. These service agreements are per individual student's IEPs. These are organizations that we have worked with in the past. The other thing that I felt was important to mention here that Mr. Chambers shared with me last week is that our expenditures are down in terms of outside special education services, and we can expect yearly fluctuations in these costs because it is dependent upon the children's needs and their IEPs. But I do have to admit it's nice to see a decrease in those costs. And last, I have personnel is recommended to the Board of Education to approve the following personnel pending completion of all hiring requirements through the Department of Human Resources. I do want to point out on here that many of these supplemental contracts, if not all of them, are typically presented either during the summer or at the very beginning of the school year. We have held off on these because we didn't know what was happening with COVID and how many of these supplementals, such as choir concerts, band concerts, things like that, we would be able to move forward with. Many of these advisors have been working since day one of the school year, some of them even in the summer with their student groups to keep them going. So I appreciate all the staff's patience as we work through this process to determine which activities we would be able to provide. And there is a classified retirement on the agenda today. Tony Broyles, cafeteria manager at AI Root Middle School, is retiring on December 31, 2020, with 25 years of service to Medina City Schools. Tony spent her entire career with the district working in the cafeteria at Root Middle School. After spending the first few years as a server, Tony became the manager of the kitchen in 2002. Tony has overseen the lunch program at Root, making sure the middle school students have been well fed for the last 18 years. Thank you, Tony, for 25 years of service, and we wish you the best in retirement. And don't hesitate to sign on as a sub.
Make a motion to approve the superintendent's action items.
Second.
Are there any discussion?
Just on that 55-1702, the sexual violence that's deleted, that policy is handled with a myriad of other policies. And that's a recommendation from Neola when they send down their recommendations. So they're always based on the current laws and to be kept current. Thank you.
I had a question about the student expulsion. It talked about the preponderance of evidence. Did we use another standard before that, and now we're adopting the preponderance of evidence, or has it always been?
It
It's always
was
been
changed
that
to
way.
be preponderance of evidence. That was the change to the policy.
Yep, we've always used strategies where we have worked to have adequate evidence as well as multiple layers in the discipline review process. Our goal is to always give our students fair due process. So this is just cleaning up the language of what we're already
Clean
doing.
it up. Okay. Thank you. Gotcha.
And again, that's based on the recommendation and the current case law is where that is. Thank you.
Mrs. Busby, is there any public comment on any of these items? Okay. Hearing none, Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
One more thing, I'm sorry,
I'm
real
sorry.
quick. I did just want to thank the boosters as well for their donations. They're very generous to our students and our student athletes, and I would like to thank them for their donation for the new uniforms. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up too, which just reminded me, I do recall going down to the OSBA conference last fall and attending a session where it was addressed as far as those types of monetary donations need to come to the school and then let the school handle all of the purchasing. So I'm glad to see that the district is following the way it should be and with clear transparency. Okay, Mr. Chambers, will you call roll call on the action items of the superintendent?
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the final item to present this evening is another personnel item. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve a pay raise of 2% for the following administrators for the remainder of the 2021 school year, and to agree the delay in compensation approved at the August 24, 2020 board meeting be considered null and void as of this date due to administrative increases being reinstated. I do want to note that we do have this item listed differently than we typically do, and have included all of the administrators' names that would be involved in this potential increase. I do want to point out that this is not all of our administrators, as not all of our administrators were eligible for increases for various reasons.
I'll make a motion to approve this action item.
I'll second.
I'd like to ask for any discussion on this item.
Just a quick comment that anytime we look at increases, it's always something that we look at very carefully. I know this year with COVID, we've been concerned, and there's been delay in this increase because of just the amount of suffering, I guess, financially that's going on in the community. And I think the board was sensitive to that. And that's not to say it's gone away, it's still there. But I think there's a recognition how critical the administrators are to the operations of the district and how important their work is, and how much additional work has gone on as a result of COVID with the probably double or triple the communication that would have gone on otherwise. I would say 83% of our district, at least this past month, expenses are related to personnel, including benefits and pay. So when you look at a district, almost 85%, 83% of your expenses are all personnel. So it is the largest percentage of expenses. So all I would say is the board doesn't take lightly when we do this sort of thing, and there's many hours sometimes that go into these discussions. So thank you.
I agree with everything you said, Rob. But I'm really torn on this, and the reason is because I understand that we have a responsibility to our students and our staff and our district to make the right decisions to give our kids a great public education experience. But, when I look out the door, I don't see a healthy economy, And it could be debated. I mean, some sectors might be doing well. You mentioned the airline. I mean, it's not doing well, but that one day it seemed like it was. Sometimes it's up and down. But I just don't, I'm not seeing it. I see a lot of people struggling. We have, one of the things that affects me more than maybe most is my wife volunteers at Cups Cafe, which is a nonprofit to help people in need. And there is a need. Feeding Medina County, you know, I know a lot of us have volunteered at Feeding Medina County to pack bags for people in need. And if there wasn't a need, we wouldn't need these organizations. But they're there because people are struggling. Our school district even helps out with the kids, or not the kids, but the kids that qualify for the reduced lunches, and the families. Our school district helps those families out. And the state has even recognized that this pandemic is affecting our budget and has cut us, I don't know, over $1 million not too long ago. And I could go on. I mean, I'm not going to lecture anybody. But I read in the newspaper on September 18th, there was an article from the United Way about 33% of our Medina County families are struggling. And, you know, there's different opinions about that. Friday's paper in the Gazette, Bloomberg report, the jobless rate is soaring. And on that same issue of the Gazette, there was an article about, I'll read the headline. New unemployment claims on the rise in Medina County. And this was on October 18th. So again, there's evidence. It's just, what I'm trying to say is I'm torn because are our administrators deserving of a pay raise? And I could answer that in one word. Absolutely. They've worked so hard since March to put together an online program with no warning. And then they worked all summer to make that online program better and called it Online 2.0. They put together a digital academy, and they put together a program and a plan to get the kids ready to come back in person. So they've worked their, you know, I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but they've worked hard. So are they deserving? Yes. But I want the community to know that we still are thinking of them. And so do I think that the administrators are deserving of a pay raise? And I'll say again, absolutely, but just not now. I just don't think now is the right time, and to me, it sends the wrong message to the struggling people in our community. I want the community to know that we are thinking of them. And with the pandemic, Governor DeWine had a press conference today, and he was in Cleveland. The numbers are going up, and he's literally begging people to wear masks and to social distance so that we could stop this thing. And who knows what the future holds. We don't know if there's going to be any more business shutdowns. So with that uncertainty, yes, and I know this is not a popular thing to do, but yes, our administrators are deserving, but I just don't think now is the right time. And since we have to vote on it today, I just can't support it today. I'm not saying I won't do it in the future, but just not today. And I know that's not a popular thing to do, but that's coming from my heart, so thank you.
So I agree with a lot of what Ron has said. I've had a hard time over the last several months being okay with handing out increases in light of what has happened during this pandemic. As a small business owner, I look at expenses every day and try to decide if I'm getting a return off of the money that I'm spending. And I kind of use that process outside of my business as well. I don't think there's any argument that our administrators are a critical part of our kids' education, and that these increases can be looked at as an investment in their future. I mentioned a little bit ago that during a finance committee meeting, and I mentioned at the last meeting, that we're forecasting conservatively, but I also recognize that we are paying attention to what we're spending, and we're spending conservatively also, and we're putting projects on hold. After a lot of consideration, I do recognize that these increases were budgeted for. They actually come in a little bit less than what we budgeted for. And I also recognize that we have 2 administrator positions that we are not filling this year. So we're saving 2 positions at triple digits, 6-digit figures. So after a lot of consideration, a lot of discussion, I've decided that the positives outweigh the negatives of this increase, and I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you. I would just like to add that this is a very difficult position the board is in. We are acutely aware of every expenditure, its effect on the community. At the same time, we do not want to lose quality people. These employees have worked so hard and have succeeded in getting our students back into the buildings this fall. The hoops that they've had to jump through and the moving targets that they've had to hit to accomplish that, we all know has been one of the biggest challenges in their careers. We want to make sure that these individuals working for us to ensure the long-term success of the district, that we have them. As we all recognize from years of observing surrounding counties, a successful school district is one of the foundations of a successful and prosperous community. That in turn makes our community an attractive destination for companies to invest in and in people to want to come to live here. You can't have one without the other, and that is why I am supporting this action item. In the long run, it is so that the district can continue moving forward in its pursuit of providing a quality education for every student every day, which is what I know is in the first and forefront of every decision that these administrators, and again, the list, and it was one of the things that I asked Mr. Sable to put on and to present it that way, so that people understand just who it is that we're talking about. Thank you.
I have one other comment I'd like to make. I think it's worth noting that, you know, the administrators have had a lot of the administrators, maybe not all of them, but most of them have had to pick up some additional duties over the last several months. And I think it's also worth noting that in saving and not hiring to replace the 2 administrators, that a lot of those responsibilities are being spread amongst the administrators that are still here.
Just one other thing. When you look at the list, we know these people more than just being an employee. You get invested in their, when you have a conversation with them, their stories, their lives, and all that. So it makes it tough. It's just not an easy thing. And I know I'm going to be the most hated man in Medina, but my heart is speaking. So just not tonight. That's what I'm saying. Just not tonight.
Mrs. Busby, is there public comment on this action item? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, will you call roll?
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
No.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
At this time, we've reached the public participation of the meeting. Community members wishing to address the board are asked to abide by the following guidelines. Attendees shall register their intention to participate in the public portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting. After those that have registered have spoken, if time allows, the board president will ask for public participation from all other attendees. Please state your name, address, and affiliation. Please keep comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. And I will ask Mrs. Busby or Mr. O'Call if there's any community members wishing to speak. Okay, yes?
Mr. Kuhar would like to have the board address why policies are not marked up so that the community knows what the changes are.
Yeah, the reason why is this is a first reading of the policies. Once the board accepts the first reading of the policies, then we make publicly available what those policies are. These policies were actually put on the agenda in the public section by accident early on. Usually that happens after the board approval of the first reading.
Also, the policies as they exist are currently in board docs in the policy manual. So as they currently exist, they are in there. But as far as the mechanics of that question, they're a draft form as the committee looks at them, and it's pretty rare. Most of it's dictated, but once in a while there's a couple options. Like, for instance, does the report go to the superintendent, or does the report go to the designee of the superintendent? So sometimes the committee has to, and it's the administration recommends, well, we'd like that to go to this person, to the business office or something. So those are the types of decisions that are usually made by the committee for the most part. But like this standard discussion that we had earlier, that's not dictated by the committee. That's dictated by Ohio Revised Code. That was not something that we, to my understanding at this point, but that's not something that we decided to make it a preponderance standard. That was the standard that's put in the Ohio Revised Code.
Are there any other questions from the community members? Public participation? Not questions.
Not really just comments.
Okay. Mr. O'Call, do you? Okay. At this time, I would like to make a motion to move to executive session to consider the employment, dismissal, and discipline of a public employee or official. Joining the board in executive session will be Mr. Sable, Mr. Chambers, Dr. Kwolek, and Mr. Shields. And no action will be taken once we leave after executive session.
Like the second going into executive session.
Yes, Ms. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore.
Aye.
Thank you.